This is David Britt, your traveling instructor, coming to you today from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. That's Illinois in the background, the Mississippi River there. Cape Girardeau, for those of you who are not familiar with the town, the small city, has about, 40,000 people here in the town, swells to about 55 because it's the home of Southeast Missouri State University. There are three things that I'll note. There are several other things, but three things that I'll note that are famous, that make Cape Girardeau famous. One, some of you may like this, some of you may not like this, but this is the birthplace of Rush Limbaugh. So like him or hate him, he still grew up here. The second one is the Ben Affleck movie Gone Girl was filmed here in Cape Girardeau. And then finally, and probably most famously, is that a word, famously? Well, if it's not, I just made it up. This is where Southeast Missouri State has an alumnus here in the undergraduate program that's incredibly famous. That'd be me. Sorry, not famous, but this is where I got my undergraduate degree, here in Southeast Missouri. So welcome to Cape Girardeau on a very sunny day here in the middle of March. All right, so let's talk about Lesson 2. Let's do Lesson 2 review and Lesson 3 preview for MSOM 601, Problem Solving and Critical Thinking. So in Lesson 2, you had a discussion board that talked about comparing and contrasting comparing and contrasting critical thinking with strategic thinking. Now, there's a big difference between the two, but sometimes people use them interchangeably. And some of the best differences, you did a great job, from what I've seen so far, you've done a great job on looking at these. I put a post in there that helped define some. I read a blog post, and I normally don't like to use blog posts in the course, but this person did a really good job of defining the differences between the two. And also, if you wanted to use the strategic thinking pyramid that I supplied, you'll see that critical thinking is the foundation for strategic thinking. And so that's all part of the compare-contrast. Also, I hope you begin to use that compare-contrast model that's there. It'll be very helpful, again, not only in academic circles, but hopefully in business as you're analyzing different proposals and things for your boss or for your department going forward. Okay? So that was discussion 1. Assignment 1 was taking a talent lens assessment to find out what your critical thinking style is. I hope you found this very beneficial. Again, these are things that I like. I like people to understand a little bit about themselves in my classes. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the last video or not, but I had a student one time who said, David, when I get finished with one of your courses, I feel like I've gone to the psychologist because you're constantly talking about how does this impact you, what's your thought process, how do you approach this personally, and I like that. I took that as a compliment, I think, and I think they meant it as one. But at least from that perspective, I think you need to learn a little bit about you as we go through these courses too, and not just fill your head full of facts, figures, and theories, okay? And so you came up with a critical thinking style. I hope you looked at those and you analyzed those very closely, all right? And then you took the same information that you had on those, the 7 different critical thinking styles that were available, and you used those as you looked at Amina's story. Now, the different people in Amina's story had different critical thinking styles, and thank God they did, right? Because you think about the ones that needed to be insightful, the ones that needed to be analytical, the ones that needed to be open-minded, the ones that needed to be timely, all played very strong roles in Amina's story. And so my hope is that you can see through that example how all of those critical thinking styles were needed in order to have success in getting Amina back to health and getting her back to Nashville, and then getting her back to Iraq, and then getting her out of Iraq the first time. Okay, so I hope you found those to be enjoyable. Sorry for the wind today. I hope this isn't cutting up too much. So that was Lesson 2. So let's bounce forward to Lesson 3, where we're going to dive into problem solving a little bit. And the first discussion question this week talks about the importance of defining the problem. Now, this is really, really hard today. And part of the reason is time is money, right? So we got to quickly get to a solution. We got to get things done. We may spend, go out to a strategic planning meeting and spend the first 2 hours talking about what issues are we facing today. In essence, what problems are we solving? So we got to cram all of our issues into a 2-hour meeting so that we can put all this stuff together. Well, I got to tell you, if you don't correctly identify the problem, you're going to be in trouble. And so that's what this discussion board is really about. So make sure you use some outside sources, you use your personal experience as you begin to talk about those questions of the importance of defining the problem. Discussion 2 this week presents you with another problem-solving method that some of you who have a Six Sigma background may be very familiar with, and it's called the is not technique. And so, sorry for the graininess on the video on this one. You may have to expand the video so you can see it. But the importance behind this, I think, gives you a very good tool to get at the heart of a problem. Because what it does is it asks you, is or is not. I mean, is this particular situation, is this activity, is or is it not part of the problem? And so the video that I found here is actually a pretty good one. I've used the is not technique quite a bit in business, particularly as we're trying to find specific problems that may be very complex to find. Okay, so that is discussion 2, the is not technique. And then finally, in application 1, you're going to look at different problems in Amina's story. Now, there was one big problem in Amina's story, and that was we had a sick girl named Amina who was going to die unless she received help. However, as you read through that story, you're going to see that there are many, many smaller problems that were included that made up, that were all part of that big problem. And so what I want you to do is to identify some of those smaller problems that they faced in trying to get Amina out of the country, trying to get funding for it, trying to get tribal elder approval and all those things that were needed. Because again, it's very rare that there's one big problem. There's one big problem and a bunch of small problems that you'll face going forward in any type of problem solving today. And so talk about those in particular as it relates to Amina's story, and pay particular attention to something called the RED model. Now, I like the RED model because the RED model is very, very simple, and it's something that I think you can use day to day in your everyday lives, and it's something that you can remember. So the RED model, I mean, there are hundreds, trust me, there are hundreds of problem-solving models out there, but I like to pick just one, and RED solves most of my needs for me. And RED stands for Recognize Assumptions, Evaluate Arguments, Draw Conclusions. Now, when you look at this, look at each step as it being very important. Recognizing assumptions, whenever we face a problem, or whether you're on a problem-solving team or you're looking to go forward, all of us, trust me, all of us bring in some assumptions to that problem-solving method. It may be what we've done before. It may be the person on the team with us. We didn't like it the last time they were on the team. So I'm bringing in some assumption biases for that person going forward. And so some of us may assume that, well, that was a problem before, it's not a problem anymore. But it's really important to make sure that whether you or the team get all of those assumptions on the table before you start moving on evaluating different opportunities. So the first thing that you need to do, recognize the assumptions that you and that other team members are bringing into that problem-solving process, okay? The second step, evaluating arguments, you're all going to have ideas on how to solve the problem. And so it's always critical to make sure that people feel free to lay those different methods on the table. Because if they're not on the table, then you can't evaluate them, right? And so you need to make sure that you accurately and clearly evaluate those, and that you clearly talk about what those different arguments are as you go forward. And then finally, you draw conclusions. So based upon all of my preconceived assumptions that I'm bringing in and all the different options that are out there to solve it, at some point, you've got to make a decision. You've got to draw some conclusions, and it's got to be led towards action. And so that's the RED model. And I would encourage you to use that. I always tell people, I love the red model, and you're going to have some other questions in this degree program, whether it's a discussion board or an application. I'm not going to ask you to apply the red model, but if you do, and you apply it without me asking you to apply it to a particular discussion, I do the happy dance. I mean, you're never going to see that. I'm never going to show that on a video. But I do the happy dance. The reason that I do is because it shows to me that you're thinking about these, that some of the things that we're presenting is actually something that you can use going forward. Okay? So that is the application for this week. I hope you had a great week. I hope week 2 was good. After week 1 just being an introduction, week 2 really focused on getting involved in the class and problem solving and critical thinking. Lesson 3 coming up is going to be about problem solving. So have a great week. If you need me, make sure you reach out and touch me. Study hard, and I'll chat with you soon. Good day from Cape Girardeau, Missouri.